Hey YouTube, Morgan here, and welcome back to my kitchen. Today I'm going to be trying a new recipe. This is actually, I think, the first time I've ever bought cauliflower. I'm going to be making pizza with cauliflower crust to stick to my low-carb diet. And I've got one head of cauliflower about this size. I don't know if it's a pound. I didn't weigh it. I did a grocery pickup, so I just took whatever they gave me. And because I'm not using already riced or frozen riced cauliflower, I'm gonna have to pre-bake the cauliflower before I make the crust. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. I've already rinsed the cauliflower. I'm gonna take off all of the green bits, the leaves, and the stem, and I'm going to grate it up with my box grater into a bowl. I'll spread that out onto a cookie sheet and pop that in a 400-degree oven for about 10 to 15 minutes until the cauliflower is tender. And then once that's cooled, I'll go ahead and get the rest of my ingredients ready. So let's go ahead and get started. Now I'm using a box grater today, but the recipe actually says you can use a food processor. My food processor is pretty tiny and it's kind of on its last leg. I really need to get rid of it, but I just hate throwing things away. So I'm going to be using my box grater instead, although the food processor would definitely make this a lot quicker and easier. I'm not quite sure which of these I'm supposed to use. I'm going to use this side one. I'm going to save this for the Parmesan and use this for the cauliflower. I started with grating up the whole head, but I quickly realized that this was not working very well, so I did go ahead and take the florets off of the stem and grate those each separately. I made quite a bit of a mess doing this, so if you can or don't mind buying the pre-riced cauliflower, that might be a good option. I actually have bought more cauliflower since I filmed this video, and I'm planning on making cauliflower crust pizza again, and I did go ahead and buy the whole head, so I'm going to cut the florets off first to make things easier. Here I am spreading out the cauliflower onto a baking sheet with a silpat on top. You can use parchment paper, but I was out, and I baked it for about 15 minutes on 400, and I'm actually going to try to wring out as much liquid as I can because I want this to be really crispy. I don't really want soggy crust at all. I want it to be as close to a cracker as I can. It didn't end up turning out that way, but I did get quite a bit of liquid out. You can see here how much it shrunk from the removal of that liquid. And once this step is done, this is kind of the pre-step. You can skip this if you buy the already processed riced cauliflower. I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of my ingredients for the crust ready. Here I am grating up some Parmesan, which is going to go in the crust. This is also a pretty big bulk of the crust ingredient, and it added a really fantastic flavor. It also helped it brown up really nicely. The recipe also called for soft goat cheese instead of the Parmesan, although it did say you could use the Parmesan as a substitute, so I might try that next time. I bet it would be really delicious. This is about a third of a cup of Parmesan. I'm also adding a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of dried oregano, and the binder in this recipe will be 1 large egg beaten. I'm making sure all my ingredients are well mixed before I add the egg, because once the egg's in there, it really changes the texture, and I want to make sure everything is well dispersed in the crust. Once I add that egg, it really starts coming together, and it's just about time for me to spread this out. You're going to flatten it to about 1/8 of an inch thick. I didn't measure how flat I got it. I just tried to make it as big of an area as possible and as thin as possible because, as mentioned earlier, I really wanted this to be a thin and crispy crust. It was still a little bit soft, and I'm not sure if it's just because it's cauliflower and still had some moisture content or because I really packed on the toppings, but I'm going to give this another try and see if I can't improve on that. Speaking of toppings, I'm going to go ahead and shred some mozzarella. I've got the crust pre-baking in the oven right now. It's going to bake on 400 for about 30 to 35 minutes, and then I'll flip the crust over and bake it for another 10 minutes or so. In addition to the cheese, which every pizza needs, I'm also going to be caramelizing some red onion. Here I am dicing up some pepperoncini, which is a really nice vinegary, salty, tangy topping that we like to add to our pizza. It also adds a nice little mild spice. We do buy the hot pepperoncini, but they offer a mild version as well if you're not really a spicy lover. And I'm not dicing these too fine, I'm basically just cutting them into rings. Time to caramelize those onions. I'm going to take your time on this part so they don't get too charred, just sweet. Next I'm going to slice the pepperoni. I prefer to buy the whole stick as opposed to the pre-sliced stuff because 1, I can control the thickness of the slices, and 2, I don't know what they add to preserve the bagged pepperoni. Probably extra preservatives that's not really needed. Pepperoni is already cured, so it should last a long time. As you can see, this crust is not very crusty yet. It's still pretty soft. My husband had the genius idea of getting out another Silpat to help me flip this over, because the spatula, I was worried it was just going to split right down the middle. So I'm putting this back in for the other 10 minutes, and it looks a little bit burned, probably because of the way the Silpat was laying on my baking sheet. It's too big, so it had better contact in the middle of the crust as opposed to the edges, but it still tasted great. It was not overdone. I spread some homemade pizza sauce on it. I'm topping it with the cheese. I'm giving it a healthy covering of mozzarella now, and then after I get the rest of the toppings put on, I'll put a little bit more mozzarella and we'll grate some Parmesan on the very top. Coming up with the toppings and actually topping the pizza is probably my favorite part of making a pizza. And my husband's worked at a couple of pizza joints too, so he loves this process as well. He frequently helps me out when I'm doing this part. And when we're doing traditional crust, I a lot of times will come and ask him to toss the crust to stretch it, because he's better at flipping it up in the air and stuff. I'm a little bit too afraid to do that. But with the cauliflower crust, you don't really need to worry about that. So far on the toppings, we've got the pepperoni down, we've got the pepperoncini down. Here comes Ian with the caramelized onions, and they are pretty hot, but I'm used to touching hot things, so I'm just using my hands to kind of get these spread over the pizza as evenly as possible. And that's really the most important part about topping a pizza. You want to make sure you have even coverage. So my husband actually had the genius idea to go ahead and throw some sun-dried tomatoes on top of this, so I chopped some up in the background and I got those added to it. And here is our last topping of the mozzarella. The bottom level of mozzarella is more of like a topping glue. This helps to keep everything down too, but it's also really gives it a lovely browned effect after the pizza is out of the oven. The Parmesan is also extremely important for the browning. It does a great job of that, and I didn't put enough on, so Ian's putting a little bit more Parmesan on. He thought it needed some more. It also helps to crisp the pizza up a lot too, because mozzarella is a melting cheese. It's got more water content, so it's the stringy gooey cheese, and Parmesan gives it a nice crispy crust. And last but not least, we've already baked the pizza for a few minutes, and we are adding some blue cheese right at the end here. We're going to bake the pizza for another minute or so just to give the blue cheese a nice melted effect, but this turned out absolutely fantastic. The flavors really popped and complemented each other nicely. The crust was well done. It was not burned or anything like that. We did not have any leftovers. I think we had about 3 pieces each, but it really turned out well, and I will definitely be doing this again. Let me know what you think about this recipe in the comments section. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share my channel if you know of anybody looking for low carb recipes or just cooking recipes in general. And if you're new around here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you know when I've got new videos coming out. I hope to see you guys around next time. Bye guys!